call this council and committee meeting to order. Put the mic in front of me. I want to acknowledge the land upon which we are located this evening is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe people, before them the Adirondack. Many of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people continue to live in our community. They add to the richness of the life in Fort Erie. And we appreciate the opportunity to share the land that they have provided to us, and we recognize the responsibility that we bear to be good stewards of Turtle Island with the Indigenous people. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, Your Worship.
Thank you. We have quite a lengthy agenda this evening, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on announcements, but I wanted to give an overview to some extent about the planning process that guides us. We have two public meetings this evening, and there seems to be some lack of appreciation of exactly how development approvals are dealt with in Ontario. We have a Planning Act in Ontario which provides a process for development applications. Those development applications are guided by provincial policy, regional and municipal policy, municipal bylaws, regional official plan, and there is a process, and the process typically involves initial consultation between anyone who wishes to develop property and the municipality in which the land is located. In Fort Erie, we require a pre-consultation meeting. That pre-consultation meeting includes not only municipal staff, but it also includes regional staff and sometimes staff from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority as an example. And that pre-consultation process identifies the types of reports and studies that are necessary for an owner to proceed with any of their development aspirations. At that level, it's the staff of the municipality that's dealing with the owner of the property. The council eventually finds out about what's being proposed through the application that is made and then eventually a public meeting. Prior to the public meeting, most of you know that there's typically an open house that's held so that the developer can meet with people who live in the neighborhood of the development to get an idea of what the feeling of the neighborhood might be for any proposed development. At the public meeting stage, the municipality, the council receives an information report, provides councillors with background information relative to what is being proposed, what issues have been raised by the public at the open house or through communication with members of council or members of staff, and the response to some of those concerns and issues that should be highlighted and considered by the council as they're moving forward. The public meeting is the opportunity for the planning staff to provide council with a clear understanding of what the proposal is all about. It provides the proponent of the development an opportunity to address council and respond to questions that members of council may have, and it provides the public with the opportunity to address council if they support the development or if they don't support the development or if they have concerns or questions about the development. So at this stage of the game, no decisions have been made with respect to this development by council, and the ultimate decision maker with respect to an application under the Planning Act rests with the council, subject to an appeal by either party, either the owner of the property or residents if they don't agree with the decision made by council. So that's an overview of the background with respect to the public meetings that we'll be dealing with later on this evening. There are a couple of addenda. The first one relates to the addition of a report, PDS 25 for 2022, relative to the sale of marketability property at 271 Ridgeway Road. The second deals with some of the comments received following the preparation of the report relative to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 015-850 Rebstock Road. And the second addendum deals with the removal of some items from the agenda because of the length of the meeting, so that under basically the corporate and community services portion of the meeting is being deferred to a later meeting, which will be held on May the 9th, 2022. That is the delegation by Kim Helsden and Brian Maskell, consideration of 2 items from the town's land committee minutes, one December 2nd, 2021 minutes, the other the February 10th, 2022 minutes. So that takes us to declarations of pecuniary interest. Madam Clerk, I have, let's see, now that we've removed that delegation, I have a pecuniary interest with respect to report PDS 22-2022, which deals with the Bridgeburg North secondary plan, insofar as I live adjacent to that area that is going to be studied. And so I will ask whoever the acting mayor is to take over the chair. Are we at Councillor? Okay. Councillor McDermott, so I'll be asking you to chair that portion of the meeting when we get there. And the other ones that I had were under the corporate services matter, so since they're removed, I don't have a conflict. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have a declaration of pecuniary interest this evening for PDS 23-2022. That's the regulation, control, and registration of animal rescue groups. It's the company I work for, provides contracted services to the Fort Erie SPCA, and they may be impacted by such a policy and bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And you are the chair of that committee, so you'll have to hand up the chair to Councillor Zanko. Perfect. Okay, are there any others? If there aren't, then there is an upcoming open house with respect to zoning bylaw amendment, proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 3914 Alexandra Road. That will be dealt with on Wednesday, April the 13th, 2022 at 5 p.m. in the Town Hall atrium. That's an open house. And then that takes us to the first public meeting this evening. That is the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment regarding 7 Central Avenue and 100 Queen Street. And as I mentioned before, the process will be that council will receive background information from a member of staff. Looks like it's going to be Mr. Hurlovich. Ms. Dilwaria. Okay, so you've been given the task of doing both public meetings. You have broad shoulders from here, at least it looks like. So Ms. Dilwaria will provide us with some background information. Then we'll ask if councillors have any questions, they'll ask their questions. Then we'll ask the proponent or the proponent's agent if they wish to address council. If they do, we'll hear from them, and then members of council can ask any questions. And then we'll ask the public whether they're supportive, not supportive, have questions. And that will be the same format that will be followed when we get to the public meeting regarding Rebstock Road, which I'm guessing some of you are here for. Ms. Dilwaria.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Just stay away.
An application for a combined official plan and a zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted by Lee White, who represents Compass Heights Development Limited, owner of the subject property known as 7 Central Avenue. The purpose of the application is to permit the construction of a 12-story mixed-use building on the subject lands that has a residential density of 402 units per hectare. Notification for tonight's public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice in the March 17, 2022 edition of the Fort Erie Post newspaper. In addition, property owners within 120 meters were mailed a notice of the complete application and public meeting on the same date. This is an aerial photograph of the subject lands as well as the surrounding neighborhood. The subject lands are located on the northwest corner of Central Avenue and Garrison Road and are in the Gateway Secondary Plan area. The subject lands are currently vacant. The applicant has installed a temporary trailer for a sales office on the subject lands. Peace Bridge service area is located to the north. Garrison Road and Garrison Road and Royal Canadian Legion is located, and commercial establishments are located to the south. Central Avenue and Nexus Enrollment Center and Veteran Way are located to the east, and Knights Motel Inn and commercial establishments are located to the west. This slide shows the current official plan designation for the subject lands. The subject lands are designated as Code Mixed Special Policy Area 23, which permits the construction of a 12-story mixed-use development with a maximum residential density of 349 units per hectare. The applicant is requesting to increase the residential units in the building, which will result in the density of 402 units per hectare. No changes are proposed to the building height and building footprint. This slide shows the current zoning on the property. The lands are zoned site-specific Code Mixed Use 1, CMU 1659 with a holding provision. The holding provision was included to ensure the sanitary sewer system would be upgraded to support the permitted uses. The applicant is requesting to rezone the subject lands to a new site-specific CMU zone to allow an increase in the residential density and reduce the interior side yard setback. This slide shows the proposed development that consists of a 12-story mixed-use building, which includes 230 dwelling units and 879.9 square meters of commercial space. The site will be accessed via Central Avenue. The applicant is also proposing a service entrance to the north. The applicant is providing adequate parking spaces, the majority of which will be provided in the parking garage, and a small portion would be located outside. In addition, 15 parking spaces will be reserved for Peace Bridge border services. The site-specific regulations are requested to allow an increase in the residential density from 349 units per hectare to 402 units per hectare, and a reduction in the westerly interior side yard, which is right here. Right here. The standard CMU zone allows the building to be constructed to the lot line. However, staff had recommended 1.3 meters along the westerly lot line to provide some spatial separation. The applicant is requesting to remove the setback requirement to allow the construction of a canopy that was recommended in the wind study to mitigate the wind impact. This slide shows a rendering of the proposed development. An open house meeting was held on February 16, 2022. The meeting was attended by staff, owner, and his agent. None of the area residents attended the meeting. This slide shows some of the pictures of the subject property. This is looking at the subject property from Central Avenue, looking west at the intersection of Garrison and Central Avenue, looking west to Mather Arch, looking north on Central Avenue, looking south on Central Avenue, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Delwari. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Just in regards to the dwelling units, are there going to be 230 dwelling units? Is that the number?
That's right. Through you, your worship, to the councillor, yes. Now the number of units have been increased to 230, so that would be the number of units.
Just another question. At the beginning, you mentioned that there's going to be 402 units. Or am I mixing the two?
Through your worship to the councillor, the 402 is the units, is the density for the site, 400 units per hectare, but the 230 would be the actual number of units in the building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of council? Councillor Butler and then Councillor Lubberts.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of questions. I'm a bit confused, which is not normal for me. So I wondered if you could go back to slide 5 and then to slide 7, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It just went a little bit too fast for me.
Okay.
Maybe it wasn't slide 5. I apologize. Maybe if we go back to slide 7, that might be better. So when you say that they'd like to remove the setback of 1.3 meters, I believe, in this diagram, are you able to point out where that would be?
Sure. Through your worship to the councillor, this is the setback they are proposing to reduce right here.
Okay. And is there a specific reason why they would need to reduce that? I mean, it's not very big to begin with. It's what, 3.5 feet, 4 feet?
Through your worship to the councillor, the reason they are requesting, because they have to construct a canopy, and that canopy is required to mitigate the wind, and that's the reason they are coming in for that reduction.
Okay. And you mentioned that they would like to increase from 200 to 230 units, but not reducing the footprint and keeping the existing footprint. Those 30 extra units are going to be an accumulation of units that are going to be scaled down. What does that actually mean? What's the square footage that we're looking at?
Through your worship to the councillor, they are going to be reducing the size of the units. Previously, the unit size was pretty big and it was not economically feasible for them to market it. Now they are going to be reducing the unit size. And to give you an example, for one-bedroom unit, what they are proposing is it would range from 539 square feet to 705 square feet. For a two-bedroom, it would be somewhere between 820 to 1,100 square feet. And for 3 bedrooms, it would be between 880 to 1,200. So these units are still pretty big, but initially they had come in with much bigger unit size.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a couple of more questions, if you don't mind. There is you spoke about the parking that was going to be allotted for the CBSA. What about the individuals from the duty-free shop that have been parking there and walking down to their employment? What happens to them?
As part of through your worship to the councillor, as part of the negotiation with, maybe the applicant can answer that better, but we were required to provide 15 parking spaces for the Peace Bridge Authority. And the rest are catered to the site, which is 44 parking spaces for the commercial space on the site and remaining 230 for the residential units. So they are providing 312 parking spaces on site, but 15 spaces are allocated to Peace Bridge.
And then one final question, if I may. The number of underground parking spaces are going to be how many?
Through your worship to the councillor, they are not providing underground parking spaces. They would be a parking garage. 2 levels of parking garage, and then some of spaces are provided outside.
Okay, I'm sorry. One last question. Where is that going to be located?
It's within that building.
Within the first part of this building or
Yeah,
the farthest?
I would assume it would be in this section, and maybe the applicant can answer that question once he's here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop, and Amiga, thank you very much. What were the sizes of the new units?
The one-bedroom unit, this is just the information I've received, it ranges from 539 square feet to 705 square feet for one bedroom.
So it's increasing or decreasing from
The
700
previously,
to 500?
that's the range, that there are different units of different sizes in the building. So, but previously, the previous application the applicant had submitted, the unit size was much bigger than this. So they have scaled down approximately 8 to 10%.
And just out of curiosity, what was the reasoning to change the size of the units?
Through your worship to the councillor, it's my understanding it was because the unit size was quite big. It was difficult for them to market it. Now making the unit smaller, it will be more easy for them to market it and possibly have better turnaround.
So one bedroom was 500 square feet. What was a 2-bedroom?
2-bedroom was between 820 to 1,100.
And a 3-bedroom?
Was between 880 to 1,200.
From
So
what?
to 880 to 1,200. But the applicant can provide more details, but that's my understanding.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Anything further, Councillor Lubberts?
No, that's enough.
Any other councillors? Ms. Dewaria, before you leave, the report talks about the community benefits provision, talks about the fact that that's related to the height of the building, but the calculation for determining the amount of the financial community benefit is based on the value of the property. Has there been any change in the value of the property, or will there be a change in the value of the property if the number of units is increased from 200 to 230?
Your worship, there would be an increase in the value. We have done an appraisal, but just because the official plan is very clear that the applicant can only, town can charge that increase the community benefit only for increase in the building height, and that's a reason, even though the value is increasing, but the building height is not increasing.
Yeah, I think you're missing my point. This is a request by the developer to enhance the development by increasing the number of units, which you're correct, doesn't increase the size, but the size is relative to the number of units. The height is relative to the number of units. So if you're suggesting that a developer could come in, propose a building with 100 units, get that approved, pay the community benefit amount based on the value at 100 units, then move to have 200 units and increase the value of the building, that doesn't seem quite appropriate. So I wonder if maybe the staff can look into that. I'm not suggesting that there be a new community benefits requirement, but that the community benefit that's being paid be recalculated based on what the actual value will be. Are there any questions from members of council arising out of that? If not, then thank you very much, Ms. Dewaria. We'll go to the
Thank you.
proponent or the proponent's agent. Good evening, Mr. White.
Good
Were you
evening.
making
Thanks
notes?
very much for your time.
You're welcome,
Great to see you all in person again.
for sure.
I had a presentation, but I'm going to forego the formality of presenting it. It is in your packages and is currently available, but I will use Ms. Dilwari's, if you don't mind putting it back up on the screen, because I could probably answer some of your questions. And Ms. Dilwari has done a great job of highlighting exactly what the summary is. Basically, we're going from 200 to 230 units within that same building footprint. The one change in that side yard, we're not moving the building any closer to the side yard, although the existing zone, or the zoning for the CMU district allows you to be right on the property line. We had set it back a little bit in consultation with planning staff. So what we've got is, after we're talking site plan details with the region, and the region had concerned about wind levels on Garrison Road, we came up with a design that included an awning over that entrance in the southwest corner of the building. And that basically the awning had to protrude out there a little bit into that side yard within that 1.3 meter setback. So it's just an awning in that area. So I really didn't think it was that big a deal, but did want to clarify that for you. This one right here, this slide that's on the screen, responds to the question about the parking. Basically, you drive in from Central Avenue, you are at grade, and there will be parking off of Central Avenue right at that location with ramps going up. So there will be parking. Originally, there was parking on the first, second, and third floors. What we did was we removed some of the units on the fourth floor, facing more inland, the visibility of the river and the lake being prime real estate within the property. So we basically took some of the land on the inside, created more parking on the fourth floor to accommodate the additional 30 units and make sure that we weren't going to be losing anything. So just, when we first started the project, we were just using big broad brush numbers, and when we came up with the footprint, we had assumed about 1,000 square feet per unit, just for planning purposes. And then as we were getting a little more detail for the architectural design and the civil design and moving forward with those, we basically came to the conclusion that they did not need to be that big. We could make them substantially smaller in some cases and a few larger in some cases, but basically that is where they realized, especially with the increase in the cost of construction materials recently, they were going to be very expensive units to sell them just on the open market. If you took the value of the land, the cost of construction, it was going to be pretty substantial. So we made the units a little bit smaller to make them less expensive and make them more marketable was the intent. And not increasing the size of the building, height or footprint, we thought that was a reasonable approach to doing that. So I can give you just a quick bit of a highlight on where we are in the process. We are working through these details here. It's doing the detailed architectural and civil engineering design are what sort of got us to this point, realizing that we could accomplish more within that same area. So we're marketing right now and starting sales for the units as the design of the individual units themselves evolves and comes together. And we're also doing the civil engineering. There's a gravity sanitary sewer that goes from our location on Central Avenue over along the river and eventually flows to the Catherine Street pump station. That needs to be improved. That civil engineering is being designed. And there's also, the region is in the process of improving the capacity of that Catherine Street pump station, which regardless of our project is experiencing capacity issues. So that is scheduled to take place, to be done in 2025. So we're proposing to commence our construction before then, but not receive occupancy until all of those off-site improvements have been made. So I'm open to any comments that you may have at this point, and anytime you've got my number.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nice to see you again, Mr. White.
Thanks.
You mentioned, it's funny because I was going to ask these questions at the report stage, but since you brought it up, I'm going to ask you, with respect to the town sanitary sewer master plan consultant's report, that does state that there is not enough capacity to accommodate the development flows and the sewer upgrades, which are desperately needed. Is your development group paying for the cost to fix that problem?
Yes.
Oh, that's good news. Okay. Just. Then I happen to agree with the mayor with respect to the value of the property and the community benefits agreement, seeing that the cost of everything has gone up, even the value of that property has gone up, probably exponentially since we entered into the agreement. Was the agreement, Section 37, ever signed?
I'm not too sure that it has been finalized. It's one of the conditions of site plan, so we cannot occupy the building without it being finalized, but yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Those are the only two questions.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any other members of council? Councillor Noyes, and then Councillor Lubberts.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. White. Mr. White, thank you for your presentation. In regards to Councillor Butler's question about the improvements to the wastewater and that, now will that be paid through development charges or above and beyond development charges?
It's above and beyond.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Lee, thank you very much. I'm trying to grapple with this increase in units, and you said that when they were doing the final details, they realized that they could make the units much smaller, substantially smaller in some cases, and I'm just trying to figure out when you make your first application, is it not detailed enough to show what size units can go where and how that works? Because somewhere along the line, I'm missing what you proposed in the beginning. And it seems like this happens on a regular basis with developers. They show us exactly what they're going to build. We get the approvals, we move along, give them the approvals, which we've done so far, and now we get hit with this rainstorm of, wow, you know, we're going to move things around, we're going to have more units, and we're going to make all kinds of amendments. And where do the details get lost, I guess, in the beginning?
Through
I
you,
need to know that.
yeah, through your worship to the council member. The problem is you trust planners to do the initial application.
Pardon me?
You trust planners to do the initial application. We were very high level. Here's a two-dimensional what it's going to look like, and 1,000 square feet sounds like a good number. That should accommodate everything. 10% allowance for public open space, and that was sort of the assumptions early on. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get everything detailed design, and if we're not going to be allowed to have the permitted use, we're not going to invest that at that time. So it was just high-level assumptions on here's the number of units and the amount of space that we were necessary, and it wasn't until the detailed design was commencing that they realized that the units could be smaller than I had assumed initially.
So when you look at what's allowed and what you're asking for is an increase from 349 units per hectare to 402 units per hectare.
Yep.
349 was there in the beginning. So now when you're doing your detailed drawings, how do you get outside of the 349? I mean, I get what you're saying, but you're going, you didn't stay within your 349 units per hectare, and now you end up with all these extra units. That's where I'm getting at. I can't be blunt with you. I can't believe that it was something that was presumptuous in the beginning, that this is what will fit. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, geez, you know, we can make more units. Mm-hmm. If you're going to make more units, you should stay within the 349 units per hectare. And you got outside of that.
Yep. Yeah, I could just add that the 349 was basically calculated based on 200 units. The 349 was an increase that was granted at the last, because normally I think the density is probably going to be closer to 75 or 100 units per hectare, which is what's normal for this district. So the 349 was granted. It's basically equivalent to 200. So it's not as if that was a parameter that we had to live with. It was the goal, and ultimately now we realize that with the potential for the increased density, it's just in my opinion, a formality that the official plan has to be changed to accommodate it.
Maybe you can explain, when Ms. Duaria was up here, she said that you're asking for an increase in density from 349 to 402.
Yep,
so the density was there. You're asking for an increase.
Correct. We're asking for an increase from 200 units
But now
to
you're
230.
telling me that that wasn't written in stone, 349.
No, that's not what he's saying. The amendment that we approved before permitted 349 units per hectare. If they want to go from 200 units in this building to 230, they have to apply for an amendment to increase the density. That's what they're doing.
That's correct. And virtually the same as what we did our first time around is we applied for an increase in the density from what was normally allowed to accommodate the 200 units that were in that preliminarily designed concept.
Yes, and I get what the mayor's saying, Mayor Redekop. I understand what you're saying, but in order to do the 400 to 349 units per hectare, this is the size of the units that you can build. Now you can build a different unit, different size unit, but you can get more units in there. And in the beginning, I don't know that developers are making units bigger than they have to be in the beginning, and then reducing them, trying to reduce them at the end, and asking for permission to reduce them at the end. This is what you were approved for, and now you come back and you say, well, no, we want to change what we were approved for. And I understand what you're saying. Not written in stone. It's not something that we have to live with. But when it comes to council and we make our decision, that's the decision that we have to live with. And then when you come along and want to change that, the perception out there in the general public is, oh, council caved, council changed, council allowed them to do more than what they were supposed to do. And that's the problem that we run into. That's the problem that I have. You know, I don't believe that developers can't look at something and say, this is what we can build. This is the best we can do to maximize our profits, and then stay with that throughout the whole process.
Councillor Lubberts, yeah, okay. This is really an opportunity for members of council to ask questions. So, Mr. White, as I understand it, once the determination was made by the developer that smaller units would be more marketable, more affordable, the decision was made to seek a further amendment to the official plan, or to the zoning,
That is correct.
to both. Okay. So with respect to the comments that I had made earlier about the calculation of the community benefit amount, you would agree that it should be based on the value of the property?
Yeah, as it was originally, reevaluate that value. We'll live with what we have to.
Okay, thank you. And so with respect to the side yard setback request, it looks to me like the building is set back 2 meters, I think, according to Appendix 2 on the southwest corner. And that's where this barrier is going to be erected?
Correct. Just basically an awning.
So why is it necessary to eliminate the setback?
Because the awning's going to protrude into that side yard, the 1.3 that was established first time around. And in order to allow that to happen, we need to.
Why is that necessary?
Why is the awning necessary?
Why is it necessary to encroach into that setback space?
The wind experts designed it to prevent exceedances of a threshold for Garrison Road, and this was one. We looked at about 4 or 5 different configurations, and this is the only one that worked.
Maybe I don't understand what a canopy is. That would be something some distance off the ground?
Yeah, but basically the purpose is in part to prevent wind from coming in and going up the building. It stops it. So you haven't got as much of the wind coming back down and being blocked and coming back onto the street, because that was the region's concern. It's a regional road. We don't want a dangerous situation potentially to exist due to the wind. So this was done in consultation with them to rectify that.
Okay, so I guess I would be asking staff to make sure that there's no, that the setback is honored as much as it possibly can be. You're indicating that it can't be in order to effect the wind mitigation. I'd like everyone to take a further look at that. In terms of the marketability, what are the price points for these units that you're now marketing?
We'd originally started on a low end of around 475 up to over $1 million for the penthouse units.
So a 1-bedroom, 475,000,
On the lower levels, yes.
and 2-bedroom?
I don't have numbers for all of them in detail, but I've got to imagine they'd be most of the 2-bedroom are going to be higher up, probably closer to the 5 or 6.
Since these units are being marketed, I presume that there are prices, so perhaps you could get that information from your client and forward that to our planning staff.
Yep.
So that could be circulated to members of council. And will any of these units be available for short-term rentals?
Not without a license from the town.
Yeah, okay, so that's not something that the owner is planning on prohibiting?
We had not
Consider
thought
it?
that it was,
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Councillor Lubberts has one more question.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Lee, just to get back at the canopy. So the setback, you're asking from 1.3 to 0. So the footprint is going to be 1.3 meter setback, and you're asking for the canopy, which is in the air. Where does the canopy start?
It will be in the air. Basically, the 1.3 meters, if you look, you got sort of a little bit of a dent where the entrance is on that southwest corner. The wall that's closer, a little further north, that's where your 1.3 meters is. And that hasn't moved or changed. But the canopy's going to be over that area that's got a little bit of gray near where the entrance is. That's going to move a little bit closer to that property line than that wall was. So it will be above the ground and basically just an awning sticking up from there.
Why can't we request an amendment just to allow the setback at that height, but not give you the relief at footprint at the ground level? So in other words, at your first floor, you have zero setback. I'm worried that you get the setback, now you're going to place the footprint right on the property line.
Which we could have done, originally, but we basically, the only reason we were suggesting zero is because we don't want to have to come back here again. If it's got to move 2 or 3 inches to satisfy the wind engineers, zero would be the parameter for the awning.
I'm losing you here.
What he's saying is
If
that-
it wasn't there originally,
What he's
now
saying-
it is, but now it doesn't have to be, so why is it?
What Mr. White is saying is that there may be some tolerance to move the canopy back from the side yard boundary, but if not, they don't want to have to come back for a further amendment. So they're asking for zero setback, and if it can be worked at some other point where there can be some setback, that will be done. But
Yeah, it's the side yard setback for core mixed use is zero. We implemented a larger side yard setback than is normally in the zoning bylaw for this area when we got our site-specific zoning. We increased the setback. Now we're pushing back a little bit just for that awning.
So in other words, what you're saying then, I guess, is that that's what you proposed in the beginning, and you realize that that was a mistake, and now you need that 1.3 meters. Is that what's happening here?
No. Originally, it was proposed to be 1.3 meters in consultation with town staff in order to provide more than what was minimally required. And then it was the region that required the canopy to be in place to mitigate the wind issue. And it was basically dealing with site plan scale issues that came up with this. And then we realized in order to have a canopy that works to satisfy the region, we need to be closer to the property line. We sort of painted ourselves into a corner a little bit there.
So is there a problem with making sure that it's written up so that the 0 meter setback is on where the canopy starts? Instead of, to me, I'm seeing it and it's 0 setback on the
Right.
property line, and what you're saying is,
So I understand your concern is you don't want the building moved over on the property line, so that if the zoning bylaw could be changed such that it allows for the encroachment of the canopy within that 1.3 meters,
Yeah.
then that would be satisfactory.
yeah, so we understand, everybody understands, but the footprint can't go on within that 1.3 meters.
The building itself, but the canopy can,
Okay.
yeah.
any other questions of Mr. White? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So at this stage, I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the application with respect to 7 Central Avenue, 100-1 Queen Street. If not, is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or to ask questions relative to the proposed amendment? Good evening.
Hi, long time no see.
Yes, and we need your full
Roxanne
name.
McKay Burton, 3252 Hyman Avenue in Ridgeway. And this is just to clarify the things that Councillor Lubberts was getting at. am I to understand that the setback will still exist at ground level so that you can still walk under there? And that it's just the canopy that's going to overhang that setback? Is that? Sorry, that's it.
Okay, well, I think in fairness, there has to be some infrastructure that will hold up the canopy, that will encroach over towards the property line. Is that not correct? Don't you have to have something holding up the canopy?
The far corner may require.
Right. Okay. Is that it, Ms. Burton?
It is, it's fine.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to ask questions or speak in opposition to the application? There being none, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed, and we're going to go to the next public meeting, which is the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 015-850 Rebstock Road. I've already provided the process with respect to the application and this evening's public meeting, and Ms. Dilwaria, you're back on.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll pull up the presentation now. An application for a zoning... Thank you. An application for a zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted by Mary Lou Tanner from NPG Planning Solutions, who represents Sherrod McQueen, owner of the subject property, known as 0-15850 Rebstock Road. The purpose of the application is to permit the construction of 6 blocks of stacked back-to-back townhouse development with a total of 154 dwelling units on the subject lands. Notification for tonight's public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice in March 17, 2022 edition of Fort Erie Post newspaper. In addition, property owners within 120 meters were mailed a notice of complete application and public meeting on the same date. This is an aerial photograph of the subject lands as well as the surrounding neighborhood. The subject lands are located on the north side of Rebstock Road in the Crystal Beach neighborhood. This is the subject property highlighted in yellow. The subject lands are currently vacant. Crystal Beach Community Center, Crystal Beach Library, and single detached dwellings are located to the north. Rebstock Road and single detached dwellings are located to the south. Single detached dwellings and Ridge Road South is located to the east. And Crystal Ridge Park and single detached dwellings is located to the west. This slide shows the current official plan designation for the subject lands. The subject lands are designated urban residential in the town's official plan. The current designation allows a variety of housing forms such as single detached dwellings, duplex, semi-detached dwellings, townhouses, multiple unit dwellings, and apartments. The urban residential designation does not provide a minimum or maximum density requirements. The subject lands are designated medium density in the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan. The secondary plan permits a maximum density of 50 units per hectare. Though the subject lands are located within the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan, the proposed application is not subject to the policies outlined in the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan, as the current application was submitted prior to Council approving the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan. This slide shows the current zoning of the subject lands. The lands are zoned Neighborhood Development Zone. The applicant is requesting to rezone the lands to a site-specific residential multiple one zone. The requested site-specific regulations are outlined later in the presentation. The subject lands are zoned site-specific residential zone in site-specific residential multiple zone in Crystal Beach Secondary Plan. As the current application was submitted prior to Council approving the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan, the site-specific RM1 zoning outlined in the Crystal Beach Secondary Plans are not applicable. This slide shows a proposed development that consists of 6 blocks of stacked back-to-back townhouse dwelling units. The proposed development will be accessed via Rebstock Road. The applicant is proposing to construct 154 dwelling units. The proposed stacked townhouse dwelling units will be 3.5-story in height with a maximum building height of 13 meters. However, the corner units which are highlighted in yellow here would be of a lower height as they abut the residential dwellings. The applicant is proposing a walkway along the westerly portion of the driveway and 3-meter landscaping strip along the easterly portion. Common amenity areas would be provided between blocks E and F and in the northwest corner of the subject property. As mentioned earlier, the applicant is requesting to rezone the subject lands to a site-specific residential multiple 1 zone to allow the proposed townhouse development. I'll highlight the requested zoning departures moving from left to right. The RM1 zoning does not permit stacked back-to-back townhouses. The applicant is requesting to add stacked back-to-back townhouses to the list of permitted uses. The bylaw currently allows a maximum density of 35 units per hectare. The proposal provides a density of 103 units per hectare. The bylaw requires at least 50% of the site to be landscaped. The applicant is proposing to landscape approx 38.3% of the site. The bylaw requires a privacy area of minimum of 4.5 meters. The applicant is requesting to eliminate the requirement. The bylaw requires a rear yard setback of 6 meters. The rear yard along the easterly lot line would be approximately 8 meters. However, due to lot configuration, the westerly block of Block A will provide a setback of 4.5 meters. The proposal does not comply with the town's parking requirements. The bylaw requires 1.5 parking space for each dwelling unit. The applicant is proposing to provide 1.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit, resulting in a deficit of 40 parking spaces. The bylaw limits the maximum building height to 3 stories and 12 meters. The proposed dwelling units will be 3.5 stories and 13 meters in height. Lastly, the applicant is requesting to recognize a lot frontage of 27 meters. The bylaw requires a minimum lot frontage of 50 meters. This slide shows the shadowing for the spring months. During the morning hours, the shadow from Block C and D will impact the small easterly portion of Crystal Ridge Park. For the majority of the day, the shadow from the proposed development will be confined within the property limits. During the evening hours, the rear yards of the properties that are fronting onto Ridge Road South will be impacted. This slide shows the shadowing during the summer months. During the summer months, when people tend to spend more time outdoors, the shadowing from the proposed development will have no impact on the abutting properties for the majority of the day. This slide shows the shadowing during fall months. During the morning hours, the small easterly portion of the Crystal Ridge Park, and in the late evening hours, the rear yards of the residential dwellings fronting onto Ridge Road would be impacted. For the majority of the day, there will be no shadowing impacts on the abutting properties. This slide shows the shadowing during the winter months. During the morning hours, the easterly and the southerly portion of the Crystal Ridge Park will have shadowing. During the afternoon, the southerly portion of the community Crystal Ridge Park will be impacted during the evening hours, and the Crystal Beach Community Center and the rear yard of the residential dwellings will be impacted in the evening hours. A public information open house meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment application was held on October 19, 2021 via Zoom and was attended by staff, applicant and his agent, and 18 area residents. Staff has also received numerous emails from the residents as well. Some of the concerns raised by the residents include density of the proposed residential development is too high. Applicant's response: the subject lands are designated urban residential in the town's official plan. The town's official plan has envisioned higher residential density and intensification on the vacant lands. However, to address residents' concern, the number of units have been reduced from 168 to 154, thereby reducing the proposed density from 112 units per hectare to 103. Lack of parking. The traffic study prepared by GHD outlines that the parking rate of 1.16 parking spaces per unit will be adequate for the proposed residential development. The proposal to provide 1.25 parking spaces will provide 1 parking space per unit and 20 visitor parking spaces. Impact on existing infrastructure. Staff's response: the existing sewers will have to be upgraded to accommodate the additional flow. The cost of upgrading the sewers would be the owner's responsibility. Traffic generated by the proposed development. The applicant's response: the traffic study prepared by GHD indicates that the traffic generated from the proposed development can be accommodated by the existing road network, and no road improvements are required at the intersection in response to the proposed development. Concerns with light, noise, and air pollution. Applicant's response: to address the residents' potential concerns, the applicant is proposing to provide landscaping along the entire perimeter of the subject property, and there would also be providing a fence along the perimeter of the property. Reduce landscaping on site. The applicant's response: the common amenity area is provided in the northwest corner of the subject property and between Block E and F. The subject lands abut a park which will also provide outdoor amenity for the future residents. Lack of secondary access and parking along the driveway may impede the flow of traffic. Applicant's response: the site is being accessed by an 8.5-meter wide drive aisle, which exceeds the town's bylaw requirements for the driveway for two-way traffic. The traffic study completed by GHD assessed the proposed site access and concluded that it will operate well under the future scenario. This slide shows the rendering of the property, future rendering. This is the aerial view. Center of the parking lot looking north. Amenity space behind Block C. Rendering for the interior parking lot. And these are some pictures of the subject property. Looking at the subject property from Repstock Road. Looking east on Repstock Road. Looking west on Repstock Road. Looking at the subject property from Crystal Beach Community Center. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dilwari. Do any members of council have any questions? I'm going to start with Councillor Lubberts, then I'll go to Councillor Butler.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Anamika, I think it was slide 13, you showed something about landscape. And then in the beginning, yes. Was this the one with the landscape?
You want to see the site plan?
Yeah.
Slide 13.
Now, at the beginning, you were saying that they were asking for reduced landscape. It's supposed to be 50%, but they're asking for it to be reduced to 38%. But now you said something about landscape. They're going to provide a landscaping rim around the perimeter.
Through your worship to the
Does that affect the 38%?
Your worship, through you to the councillor, the landscaping strip that I was mentioning would be along the perimeter of the property, like all along here. They are providing a landscaping strip, but that, even if we include all the landscaping, it just equates to 38.3%.
So even with what they're proposing in the response, it's still 38%.
Through your worship to the councillors, that's correct.
Okay, now, I forgot this part when I was doing my homework, and I just remembered it while we were going through there, so I need to ask you this question. I don't know if it's in our official plan or if it's in our zoning bylaw, but I do know that when we were discussing site plan and stuff and the development at Harbor Town, either in our official plan or in our zoning bylaw, it states that there will be no major development applications accepted by the town of Fort Erie until there is a secondary plan in place. Are you aware of that condition in our bylaw?
Through your worship to the councillor, I was aware of that, but they had submitted an application before the Crystal Beach secondary plan coming in effect. So we have to evaluate that proposal based on the current policies at time, which designated the subject property as urban residential and the zoning as neighborhood development.
Yeah, I understand that, but if we go back to the beginning of the meeting, our mayor, Redekop, he explained the process of going through these applications, and somewhere along the line, we had pre-consultation with this company before the secondary plan was put in place. And how did that come about? Do you know? Because according to what I've read in our zoning bylaw and what I've read, or if it's in our official plan,
It's in the official plan.
that pre-consultation should have never taken place.
Through your worship to the councillor, when we met with the applicant, we had mentioned to them the Crystal Beach secondary plan was in works, and we were working on it, but they wanted to proceed ahead with this development application, and based on the policies at time, we had to evaluate the proposal.
Yes, I understand that. So we broke our own rules, is that what you're saying?
What Councillor Lubberts is stating is that in the official plan, there may be a provision that states that before development proceeds in a neighborhood, there should be a secondary plan. Are you familiar with that?
Your worship, I am, but we had told the applicant that we were working on it, but the application came in and we had to process it, and that was the reason we reviewed the application based on the current
Right,
policies.
so what we'll want is clarification on what the official plan provision is, so we can see how that relates to the timing of this application. I think that's your point.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. But my question also is, I understand that the applicant brought forward his application, but our official plans makes a statement that we don't accept those applications, yet our staff did accept those applications. And I'm just wondering why we accepted it, why we didn't show him our official plan and say, we can't accept your application, the secondary plan isn't finished yet.
Mr. Hurlovich?
I need to understand that.
Through you, your worship, to the councillor. The official plan may say that, and Ms. DeWardia has already outlined that staff raised that point with them, but the Planning Act does allow the applicant to submit an application if they so wish. That's provincial law. That's what we abide by.
This is a factor that needs to be taken into account when we're dealing with this as a
Yes.
council.
We'll raise it in the recommendation report.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And so I guess my next question is, and we have it tonight as well, when we make our housekeeping amendments to our official plan, if we have to follow by the Planning Act and the rules of the province, why is it that we have that rule in our official plan? We can't do nothing with it if we have to follow the provincial, the province's rules.
Well,
I'm
Councillor
confused.
Lubberts, we have
Somebody
many.
needs to explain it to me.
We have many provisions in our official plan and in our zoning bylaw that doesn't preclude someone from making an application to amend either. Doesn't mean that we have to approve the application for amendment, but in law, they have a right to make the application. So whatever staff tells them, I mean, it could be as clear as somebody wanting to make an amendment and staff says, you can't do this, it's not going to be approved. We can't prevent the person from making the application.
Yes, but our official plan has to be approved by the province, is it not? So did the province not see that statement in our official plan and say, okay, we approve this statement, we approve this rule? That's where I'm at, and I'm sure there's a whole lot of residents that are at the same place, Mayor Redekop.
Well, we
Why
could very
was this
well be, but
application even processed?
these provisions don't act in isolation, Mr. Hurlovich.
Through you, your worship, to the councillor. I certainly understand the councillor's point. We will be bringing a recommendation back to this council. We'll be addressing that point. And, this is really a public meeting for us to hear what the public has to say. I think, I understand the councillor's question. I think we can address it.
Thank you. Councillor Lubberts, anything further?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was wondering if you could put slide number 7 up for me. So I needed to get some clarification because I do know that there are houses that abut on each side of the entranceway. And I noticed that there are several parking spaces on each side, and then there's a delineation of trees. What kind of trees are going to be planted there in order to give some barrier to the residents?
For your worship to the councillor, we don't have the details of which kind of landscaping would be provided. Those details are usually resolved at the site plan stage, but maybe the applicant would be able to answer that question.
Okay. Then I'm going to hold up until the applicant comes up and speaks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other, Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Keep slide 7 up.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dubanow. I'm looking at the driveway. I understand the driveway is 8.5 meters. Does that include the parking on either side, or is that in addition to the parking?
So 8.3, your worship to the councillor, 8.5 meter is this distance here.
Okay. Thank you. The 4.5 meter privacy area is completely removed, that's what they're recommending, right?
That's correct.
Have we ever considered, has there ever been any development that has requested that in the past? Like that there's no privacy area? I know you have that common, not you, but I know that the picture has a common area in the middle there. But has that ever been requested in the past?
For your worship to the councillor, not that I recall, and I think the request was made because these are back-to-back stacked townhouses. So even if this block D would provide landscaping along the property lines, but the units which are fronting the parking lot, they don't have the amenity area. So that's my understanding. That was the reason they had requested the elimination of the privacy area, but the applicant can throw more light on it.
A further question. You talked about that there was going to be a fence around the entire complex. So does that, I see the dotted lines. Is that what the dotted lines mean, or is the dotted line just the boundary?
These dotted lines are the boundary, the lot boundary, but that could be the fence details as well. Like they are providing a perimeter fence all along the property.
Okay, so even the areas that back onto the park?
That could be a different kind of fence, but the applicant, we don't have the fence details yet, councillors, so maybe that would be dealt at the site plan stage, but maybe the applicant would be able to provide the details.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So Ms. Dilwaria, just going back to slide 7 and the amenity areas.